Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Gandhi. I'm very nervous, so if I stumble on my words or say something like or my little bit of swearing, I'm really sorry. I'm basically going to now play you a couple of videos to kickstart this event. So if I can just move forward and then I introduce you to the panel. Okay. This is Viola Davis. She's an EGOT with her. Has everyone heard of her? Yeah? Okay. Some poignant things that she says here. There we go.
Don't talk about gender inequality of pay, because a lot of the women who've stepped forward, and I stand in solidarity with them, okay? What they're getting paid, which is half of what a man is getting paid, well, we get probably a tenth of what a Caucasian woman gets. And I'm number one on the call sheet. And then I have to go in and I have to hustle for my worth. That's what I feel like I'm doing when I demand what I feel. Listen, I have more than a 30-year professional career. I had a friend who said, yeah, but Viola, your career is better than my career. I said, yeah, but you can't compare me to you. Because once again, I got the Oscar, I got the Emmy, I got the 2 Tonys. I've done Broadway, I've done off-Broadway, I've done TV, I've done film, I've done all of it. I have a career that's probably comparable to Meryl Streep, Julianne Moore, Sigourney Weaver. They all came out of Yale. They came out of Juilliard. They came out of NYU. They had the same path as me, and yet I am nowhere near them. Not as far as money, not as far as job opportunities, nowhere close to it. And yet, I have to constantly get on that phone, and I have fabulous agents, by the way. They are getting it. But I have to get on that phone, and people say, you're a black Meryl Streep. You are, and we love you. We love you. There is no one like you. Okay, then if there's no one like me, you think I'm that, you pay me what I'm worth. You give me what I'm worth. And even in terms of roles, because when I delve into a role, I want something complicated too. I do. Just like...
Has everyone heard of Mira Sile? Yep.
Thank you, Adrian. That was beautiful. Thank you, BAFTA. This is gorgeous. Oh, actually, no, there's one thing missing. Hang on. Fixed it. So there are so many people to thank and so little time. So firstly, my wonderful parents, my father Surendra and my mother Surinder. After the partition of India, my father found himself in a refugee camp at the age of 14. He had to study under street lamps and he got a degree in philosophy. Yeah, that went down well in Britain in 1959. Never mind bloody Plato, mate. Can you drive a bus or not? He ended up being an accountant, which he hated. What he was a singer and a poet. And when he and his Punjabi mate shared their stories about their dreams and their struggles and their hopes for their children like me, that's when I really knew who they were. Because when you hear someone else's story, you stand in their shoes. They're no longer an other or a stranger or a statistic. They are as complex and as human as you are. And as a chubby brown kid from Wolverhampton, I got othered a lot. And we are all storytellers here, so we know how much it matters, what stories we choose to tell, but more importantly, who gets to tell them. Not just in front of the camera, but in the writers' rooms, in the makeup vans, around the table where the deals are done.
Thank you. Some very poignant words and stories there, I think you will all agree, which will hopefully set the tone for today's session. Are creative pathways elitist? Elitism, in this sense of the word, we're going to be talking about, whether you're wealthy, whether you're in the right rooms or circles, if you're in the right environment, people who know the right people, who understand the roles in the creative industry to give you a shot. That's kind of what where we're going with the word elitism. Born into a network, born into the opportunities. I'm your host, Gandhi. I'm the co-founder and director of DUET London. It's a B2B tech PR company focusing on ambitious tech startups and scale-ups. I'm 5-foot Punjabi Sikh with hazel eyes, long brown wavy hair, and I've been in the tech industry, PR industry, for over 18 years, working at big agencies for four of those, working on big brand names like Sony Ericsson, Autonomy, Microsoft, Fujitsu, Vodafone. I've been at the brutal end of internships, and I've also dealt with a great deal of barriers to entry, and I'm still sitting here today. So I'm really excited to be hosting this panel. So I'm going to introduce you to my panel. First up, I have Jim Thornton, Executive Creative Director of VCCP London and founding partner of VCCP Stoke. Jim, if I could ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, I am 6 foot, white male with blue eyes, a big nose, and curly hair. I've been in the business for approximately 123 years, and in that time I have worked at most agencies and worked on most things and done lots of stuff. I was asked what are the 3 things I'm most proud of. One of them is undoubtedly the foundation of VCCP Stoke, and we will talk hopefully a lot more about that over the next few.
And next is Stephen Lacey, owner of Outside London. Thank you, Jim, by the way. Sorry, I didn't mean to just brush over you. Steve.
Hello, everyone. I haven't measured myself for ages, so I think I'm 5'3". I'm disabled, so I've got what's called a lobster hand. My legs are bow, so I've got a missing fibia and a shortening of the tibia. Got 2 toes on one, 4 on the other. I'm also neurodiverse. I come from a working class background. So my dad's a dustman, also from an Irish traveller family. I worked in advertising for a number of years, and it was a struggle getting in, and I can tell you a little bit about my experiences and about why I think it's kind of quite wrong. I set out a research agency, insight agency called The Outsiders about 6 years ago, and I started looking at Brexit and before Brexit vote, and I went around agencies saying Brexit's going to happen, which was a good punt, but there were reasons for that because working class people weren't being picked up on the electoral roll. Work on a number of big kind of campaigns, so worked on This Girl Can, worked on McDonald's, Raise the Arches, Womb Stories, and also other projects as well for Body Form.
Wonderful.
And I've been smashing down the door about elitism for the last 5 years because it's a problem.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you. And last but not least, it's Peniel Orioye, freelance PR account exec.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Peniel Orioye. I'm 5'11", black female. I'm currently rounded up my master's at the University of Hertfordshire, studying journalism and media communications. And I've been in the world of advertising, broadcasting, and PR back from my own country up till here for about 5 years now. And yeah, I currently work also as a research assistant at the African PhD Scholars Network.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peniel. Thank you. So the videos that we played hopefully will set the tone for this conversation. Mira Sayal suggests in her speech that being in the back rooms, in the makeup rooms, where the deals are brokered, those are the places where you need to be. Viola talks about being a hustler and how she has to fight for her worth. Mira's really known for goodness gracious me, but they've done amazing amounts of work together, individually, and they're still fighting for recognition. So the question is, what's the answer to abolishing the barrier to entry into the creative fields? And is there actually a problem to fix? Surely the creative industry is reflective of the society we live in. And the society we live in is almost 82% white, 9.3% of them are Asian, of which 3.1% is Indian, 4% of them black ethnics, and 2.5% are black African, and 2.9% are from mixed backgrounds or multiple ethnic groups. So I'm going to ask the audience a question first, get you all involved in this. We're going to look at the TV industry, because that's meant to represent who we are actually in society. In order of being the most visible. I'm going to read out each one. Just put your hand up, which is the most visible and the least visible. So in order of visibility, which of the following ethnic groups on screen is the most visible, in your opinion? Is it the mixed multiple ethnic groups? Is it Black Africans and Caribbean? White? Southeast Asian and Asian? Okay. And what about off-screen? The same thing. Multiple ethnic groups? Black African, Caribbean, white, and Southeast Asian. Okay, that's interesting. And what about, yeah, okay, let's move. That's really interesting. I assume it's the same thing for off-screen as well, right? And on-screen. Yep, okay, great. So I'm going to leave that in the background there. As we talk through this, sorry, let me just find my notes. So the first question I'd like to put to all of you is, drawing from your experiences and obviously the audience feedback and the videos that we've just seen, and the country stats, do you think the creative industry has a representation problem? And if so, is it because of elitism? Would like to start with you first, Stephen, if that's okay.
So I strongly say that it has, in many different ways. And I think coming from a working class background, I think there's very, very few working class people in the advertising industry. And that creates non-diversity of thought, where you get a groupthink that doesn't align with the population.
Yeah.
That actually you've got a minority talking and making ads for a majority that doesn't really understand the majority in any way, shape, or form. And there's lots of examples of that, but I'll give you a recent one. So I was working for a massive brand, and we were talking about grandparents. And we're like, should we target grandparents as one of the audiences? Most audiences were families. And one of the strategists turned around and said, why do we do that? It's a mass mainstream brand. Grandparents are always skiing and they're on cruises. And I was like, no, grandparents are the new parents. They're looking after their kids and they're exhausted. And that disconnect means that the advertising is really poor. So 3 years ago, I was saying humour's coming back. And now for the first year, 3 years later, at Cannes, people were like, let's do humour. If you had more working class people, you'd have picked up that in dark times, everyone needs humour. And it's those little insights that are constantly kind of missing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, undoubtedly, it has a representation problem of pretty much every type you can think of. I think, and that, in a way, was what led to the idea for VCCP Stoke, was when, I mean, I started in the industry in '86, and it was undoubtedly more socio-economically diverse in those days. In fact, I think I come from a middle-class background. My dad was a doctor, a GP up in just outside Stoke, and I probably was one of the few people who didn't have a broad regional accent in a creative department, and actually I struggled to fit in. And about 10 years ago, I looked around, and it had completely changed in so many ways. I mean, not just socio-economically, but actually, and I mean, the female problem. When I started at JWT in 1986, there were more female creative directors than I think there have been in all the other agencies I've worked in put together. And we won't get into how that came about. But I think, I mean, to Stephen's point about humour, I've always said that the kind of smartest, funniest people I've ever known I met on the terraces at Stoke City Football Club, or travelling to games, and yet I see none of those people in our industry. They used to be in it, but they're not anymore.
Yeah.
And to me, the elitism thing is palpably true. I think you have to include in that elitism thing a geographical element, because I think London is now an elitist city just by virtue of how much it costs to live there. And that is therefore turning us, and we describe VCCP as a southeastern middle-class monoculture. And the only way we're going to change that is And this was what led to Stoke, it was like, well, they can't afford to come to us, so we're going to have to go to them. It's as simple as that.
That's really interesting. We're going to speak about class in a minute, Steve and everyone actually, and also what you said about the women. You know, back in '86, it was very heavily dominated by women. I think you'll find that's changed. So Peniel, the same question. Yes, but Peniel, for you.
Okay, so based off of my experience, the answer to that question definitely is yes. And this is me coming in and speaking of more like an international student and my observation. I've been very opportuned to have an internship during the course of my study. Did it come easy? No. As a matter of fact, it was an internship I took off based off, you know what, if I can't get a 12-month internship like my course wants me to, how about I just take a short internship and segue into the industry to just see how it was. It was a 3-month internship that I ended up staying for about 9 months, and but during the course of my search, I did see that there's a huge gap between the individuals and the employers. Now, the question is, there is a lot of advertisement, job advertisement. Obviously, you see the description and all, ranging from the experiences in the job description to the opportunities. If an employer is able, I strongly believe that you can create and build an employer, something called an employee loyalty rather. If you build an employee, give them a training for 1 year, they can dedicate 5 years of their lives to you. But the commitment to want to build the employee is not there. Coming back to his point about London now being elitist, strongly agree, because I was reading up on, yesterday, and then I found out that a lady shared up her experience and how she came from Wales, and it was so difficult for even her to get an internship, even despite being white. So it's a question of how do we fill in these gaps that are there? How do employers intentionally, more beyond definitely putting out, we are inclusive, we are diversified, if I, as a candidate, do not see it coming to your company and I'm the only black person, I would just assume you're using me as a test run. So am I a sample project? That's my next question.
I hope they're not using you as a test run. I would be deeply disappointed. Thank you so much. You actually went to answer the other question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you think the internship model is broken?
Very much.
Okay, I think we knew where we're going with that.
It is very much broken, ranging from the process of getting the internship to the process of being paid during the internship to even the possibility of retainership after the internship. A lot of things, and I do understand that obviously based off of the economics, employers really do want to also preserve what belongs to them, because at the end of the day, it's really business, so you have to be calculative and weigh your losses. I do agree. But if you're weighing your losses, I think it's a disparity of potentials. If you see candidates who can drive the vision of your company forward, you would put in a huge amount of risk in there.
Yeah.
So the possibility of getting internships that are not fully paid or unpaid. And I'm really grateful for my university, because right from when we were searching for internship, they emphasized to get paid internship.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, for them, if you were going to get an unpaid internship, the question they would ask you, how are you going to survive during the course of the weeks? So it's sometimes organized. There are some organizations that are actually very intentional in, looking after individuals who have to do internship. But no one talks about the mental toll it takes on people who are searching for it. And this is not just for me as an international student, but even for the home student, because at the end of the day, in my class of about 40 students, barely 10 of us got internships.
Wow.
That's to tell you how wild it is. So
that's interesting that you're speaking about paid internships, because my next question is actually to Jim about paid internships. So, there was a really interesting study by the universities of Edinburgh, Manchester, Sheffield, in the journal called Sociology. So if you want to look it up, please do. And it said people from professional families are 4 times more likely to be in creative industries than those from working class families. This is in December 2022. The All Parliamentary Party and the King's College also did research in 2021, and I contacted them personally to ask them if they had recent research. Their answer was, nothing has changed, use the one from 2021, because it's going to be coming out shortly. That middle-class people were twice as likely to find work in creative industries than working-class contemporaries. Now, I can go and list a whole load of new research that's out there. It's going to be the same thing that you're going to find over and over again. Because if you think of it, like the question that I asked you in the beginning, class often correlates with race and opportunity, right? And that means there's a lot of underrepresentation in our industry, a hell of a lot. And the audience, you basically said that. But going back to what you said, Jim, about 1986 was dominated by men, the King's College and All Parliamentary Group, they found that it's dominated by straight, able-bodied white men living in London. And they make up 3.5% of the population. You know, that's a lot of men. Well, I don't know. So, Jim, on to my question. As a champion of paid internships in the Stoke region, does the internship model, as it stands, entrench social immobility?
Yes and no. I think the first thing I would say, which I have to thank Stephen for. Basically, we got Stephen to do an amazing piece of research for us.
Yeah.
After we'd been kind of doing the Stoke thing for about a year, because we realised, actually, precisely because we were largely a bunch of white men and women, we didn't understand what the barriers were to our industry. And Stephen did an amazing piece of research amongst underrepresented young people across the country. And actually, one of the things that came out of it was that one of the barriers is words like internship, and actually how important language is, because an internship is something that most kids have only come across because they might have come across a film called The Intern, if they happen to be able to have Netflix, be able to afford Netflix in their house. So, and that was also allied to how you recruit for internships. So we learned an awful lot about, in fact, I have a list here because the early onset dementia is I mean, we created and ran recruitment comms that spoke to them in their own language as far as we possibly could. And so, for example, our internship that's running at the minute with 8 students from Staff's Uni, it's a paid internship for 4 weeks, run out of Stoke, but we also pay their travel to come down to the London office 1 day a week, and they work on real live stuff. We called that the best summer job ever. And we tried not to use the word internship. We abandoned CVs and encouraged applications in whatever form applicants felt would best represent them, because the written word isn't for everyone. And actually, again, it was brilliant. We received songs, we received videos, we received all manner of interesting and creative things, which no one would ever done if we just asked them for a CV. We made it easier to understand job titles and departments by creating more accessible language. So we talked about, I mean, it's bloody hard in advertising because most job titles are so obscure, but we kind of turned it into thinkers, makers, and doers, which the 3 things encompass most of the people who work. We interviewed everybody in gender-balanced pairs and really informally on their turf with a bit of guidance on the type of things that we'd ask about. And we offered everyone who applied successfully or not a VCCP mentor to help them find out more and help hone their career programming. And I think the reason the internship system is broken is just because of those barriers, I would say, to a large degree. So most of the good intention stuff, and there is a lot of good intention stuff going on across other agencies, is falling short probably because they are still applying the same kind of entrance things as they would to a university graduate or so on and so forth. Would you, I mean, I'm going to hand this one over to Stephen.
I think absolutely. No, I think you made a really good point there.
He knows more about this than I do.
Yeah, exactly as you said, Jim. I think there's several things. I was really surprised that no one knew what internships was, and that shocked me. I think it was really interesting because I was speaking to young students who were even doing design and they still didn't really know what advertising was and they weren't connecting the dots together. And one of the big failings is it's kind of a working class code, and with codes it's a bit of a generalization, but when you're working class you're told not to really sell yourself, because if you sell yourself, you kind of get above your station, and it's much more collectivist. And one of the big fears of a lot of young people is they didn't know how to sell themselves, and they didn't really want to sell themselves because it made them feel really, really uncomfortable. So when they're doing applications, it's like, I don't want to say what I'm good at because I don't feel very comfortable. Also, advertising wasn't that attractive. I mean, it kind of changed, and the army was really kind of mopping up more than kind of advertising. And you'd ask people, what do you think about working in advertising? And what's it like as a person? Because researchers like, imagine advertising as a person. And they're like, well, it's someone who's really up to date. They're middle class, or maybe upper class. Maybe they're like Hugh Grant, and they just like selling, and they're not very ethical. And if I work there, they're not really people like me. So straight away, you can see a fundamental problem with how the industry has positioned itself. And I think it's a serious problem. So I did some work with young black males on estates, and we did expert interviews. And this was just after Black Lives Matter, and a lot of media agencies were like, right, we need more black talent, and big media companies. They struggled because they're trying to get comedians, but the comedians had set up their own YouTube channels and were making more money than they'd ever do working for Channel 4.
Yeah.
So if you don't attract this talent now, they're going to end up doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And that's a big waste for and problem for the ad industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I weigh in on that?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Absolutely, Jim.
There's just a couple of really interesting things there, I think. I mean, advertising has a big problem generally, and Stephen touched on it there, which is just awareness of it as an industry and of the roles that are available. We have been utterly arrogant, complacent, and arguably narcissistic for the last 25 years. We thought we were so cool that people would beat a path to our door and desperately would come and work for us. And while that was going on, it was okay because we could afford to effectively make them pay to do placements and internships in the agency. That's no longer the case, and that, again, we learned so much just going up to Stoke. I remember the very first sixth form challenge we did, which is we developed a 6-week virtual work experience course for sixth forms up there. And we went up, and you'd say to people, they'd go, so what do you do as an advertising agency? We'd go, well, we do the meerkats. It was only when we went, well, we also built the O2 in Fortnite and put on a live gig by some band I now can't remember. Suddenly their eyes light up because that's what's interesting to them.
Yeah.
It's interesting to them. We've been losing, and we've been completely blind to this, we've been losing most of the best talent for a whole host of reasons, but one of them is because 70s, 80s, 90s was the heyday, arguably, of advertising and advertising creativity because it was predominantly television and it was still appointment of view television. And you sat there and went, fuck, I want to do that, right?
Yeah.
To Stephen's point, nobody needs to do that anymore. They can have their own TV channel now on any number of platforms. And if they're really talented, why do they want to come and work in a creative department in an ad agency where you have to deal with
But that's
people?
That's the disappointing bit, though, isn't it, really, when you've got so much talent out there and it's not representative from your TV screens into the offices. It's not representing the societies that we live in, and we live in these silos. We're not assimilated, we're not integrated, and that, to me, is probably the most disappointing part of our creative industry. You know, I'm not sure about you, Peniel, but when I spoke to my mother and said I want to go into public relations, till this day, 20 years later, she still thinks I'm a PA. to some CEO somewhere. But you write for these CEOs, you do all this stuff for these CEOs. Why isn't your name in the FT? And I'm like, that's not my job, ma'am. So, you know, it's so disappointing that as an Asian woman, that my family wouldn't allow me to get a job in the creative industry because they didn't see the opportunity there. They didn't see that there was a path to success. The path to success for them was being a CEO of your own business. We're all business makers in Indians. We've all got businesses. Being a CEO of a mother. A mother is a CEO, according to my mum, you know. So, and also just being a doctor, an engineer, a computer scientist, a mathematician, something tangible. And I don't know about you, Peniel, if you got this from your parents and backgrounds, whether because we might be our own barrier to entry. This is why I'm going down this course. Did your family ever look at you and go and say, why do you want to work in the creative industry? You will never get a job there.
Yes. Yes, my mom actually likened being a PR to sales. She says, you're literally a customer service agent. If you have to chase journalists to get cover a story, you're pretty much not different. And then I had to convince her, obviously, to say, Mom, you know what? It's going to make sense in the next few years. But she trusted me enough to say, you know what, I trust you know what you're doing. And I thought about it and wondered why that would be the first thing that popped up in her head compared to excuse me, Mom, I'm in the media industry. What do you mean? Sales? You know, and then I realized that I feel over time the definition of what back in those days being a journalist or being advertising has changed drastically, especially now with the introduction of technology. So it's like you pretty much don't exactly need them.
Yeah.
If you can do it from your home, then they get to earn more than the people who are going to the office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, then you might want to reconsider your future choices. And I realized, obviously, the definition has just been watered down. So it's like the question I then have for media houses is, did we forget the part of brand representation? Did we forget what branding was? Whereas all of that gone in, and to think these are things that obviously are core in being a media enthusiast, where did all of that go? So where did the time of, you can actually program humans to define a particular brand, whereas all of that gone now? And I think it's quite interesting to see. Hopefully, obviously, in the future in terms we get to, correct these gaps.
Yeah.
I'll just say the irony of this is that 37 years ago, I went into advertising as an act of rebellion against my middle-class background.
Perfect.
Right? And my parents were equally disappointed.
Wow.
And my mother, I don't think ever really forgave me, God bless her, for doing it. And that's how much the industry has changed in those 37 years as it's become professionalized and respectable.
Yeah.
But in terms of, again, just our experience in Stoke, on particularly Asian families, actually, we're struggling because it's the parents that we need to talk to, not the kids, and that becomes much harder.
Can I just mention my experience? Because it's a little bit different, actually. So I'm not going to show my age here, but my dad got quite excited because it was the days of Saatchi and Saatchi, and he's like, my boy's going to have a Ferrari. and then I got into advertising, and they decoupled media, so I was driving around in a Ford. So it's a little bit of a different experience.
Did you get the Ferrari then?
No.
I've seen it outside.
That was that engine roaring. I see. Okay. That's really interesting. Like the barrier to entry it's going to be well debated. I went to a recent panel with somebody. He was Nigerian as well. His name was Eniola. He was exceptional. And he said that Black and Asians are the most over-mentored and underfunded and underrepresented people that you can ever come across in the creative industry, which really resonated with me. And this was 3 weeks ago, and I still remember it. And I think he's absolutely correct in saying that. And you can see on the screen here, there. This is from the Diamond Cut report. The sixth report came out in July 2023 from 54,000 people and 1.1 TV production companies. And, you can see, since BLM, the increase of representation of black people has really increased. But Asians has decreased. It's gone down from 3 to 2.4%. So the question I have for you, Steve, is what's best practice to get people in through your doors? Consider you did the research with Jim, like what you talked about, inclusive language, but what else can we do?
So I think a lot of what Jim said is really important. I think there's two things. I think the industry needs to wake up a little bit and realise they are a minority, and that minority view is a massive kind of problem, and it does things like still worshipping about self-actualisation. Most people needs are now insecurity needs and belonging, and people just haven't really understood that. I think industry needs to kind of drop its arrogance, and I just remember doing a brief, it was about smoking and the smoking ban, and I said to the creatives, right, we need to go to bingo. And they're like, why do we need to go to bingo? I said, well, you need to understand working class people. They're like, but I'm working class. I was like, you earn 150 grand a year and you're drinking the Groucho. You're really, really not working class. You're coming with me. But they need to just kind of drop their understanding and connect more with people. And on a strategy level, just have more conversations.
Yeah.
I think those silos have been really built up.
Yes.
And I think it's really damaging, and it's damaging to ads, it's damaging to communication.
Yes.
And then I think allowing people to be themselves, and I think that's really, really important. So when I went into the ad industry, I changed everything I did. So I changed my accent. I started learning about rugby, and I hate rugby. I started learning about cricket, and I hate cricket. I started reading The Guardian, and actually I find it a little bit boring, sorry if anyone likes the kind of Guardian. But I kind of adopted everything to kind of fit in. And then suddenly there was like, it slipped one day, and someone was like, oh my God, he's working class. Let's give him the teenage pregnant mum brief. So suddenly I was getting all the social deprivation briefs because I was the only working class person in the industry.
Sounds like you were pregnant and screwed. Sorry, I had to bring that in there. So thank you very much to all our panelists, Peniel, Steve, and Jim. I'd like to open the floor up to some questions. Got gorgeous Jess here with a microphone coming around. Is there anyone who has a question for our esteemed panelist? Yes, this gentleman over. Gotta run, Jess, run.
Hello.
Hello.
Really enjoyed all your points you made. I've read quite an interesting article, excuse me, about BBH and their logo, the black sheep. And there was a quote of someone who used to work there saying that the trouble with BBH is that there's no room for any black sheep in there. And having not worked in there, but seen the profile pictures of the team working there, it's not necessarily a question, it's more of a kind of a statement, really, that I think it's absolutely true. That, and I know that I used to work at Ogilvy for a bit, and they're actually finding people with working class backgrounds and accelerating their careers, which I think is a really good thing. That's not so much of a question, really. but no,
it's an observation.
It's an observation.
Yes.
It's a hot topic,
Yes.
And I'm hearing all of these points more and more in more things I read within advertising. So I think what you guys are doing is great.
Thank you.
I mean, I think just slightly in answer to your last question and that, more and more is being done, and Saatchi's fund accommodation costs, which I think is brilliant. The And Academy made a really impressive commitment and hired 28 apprentices in Birmingham. Creature led a drive 5 years ago, the wonderful Stu Althwaite, to ensure that creative placements were paid the London living wage, and obviously BBH hired Tony Cullingham from Watford to run the barn. But the bigger problem for us, these are all great. I would argue that there is an issue that they're all still London-based, so there's still that elitist London barrier. And I think the disappointing thing for us, and I probably shouldn't use the word disappointing, is that the industry bodies aren't doing more. Because we're all operating in silos in our own agencies trying to do stuff. You kind of feel that, and we tend to be tribal and secretive. We're a highly competitive, oversupplied market, and we're all fighting for the same crumbs. So it's not in our nature to work together, but I truly believe we need to work together on this.
On that though, do you think there's a lot of virtue signalling in the industry that we're in?
Inevitably, there will be virtue signalling, but I think all of those things that I've listed are genuine attempts, possibly misguided in some cases, but they are genuine attempts to lower the barriers.
Yeah.
I think all I would say to them is get Stephen to do a bit of research for you, because you then realise there are so many more barriers that we in our white middle class bubble have never appreciated.
Can I just pick up on that? Because I think it's really interesting. I think it's vital that the ad industry works together, because the ad industry, what excited me about the ad industry is all about interesting ideas and strong insights. But what I'm seeing now is what I call fishbowl marketing, where everyone's using Google, they're all from the same background, they're reading the same report, and they're just swimming around the same fishbowl with the same ideas, the same creative. I mean, I've done a couple of pitches, and in those pitches, we've pitched one idea, and we've knocked it out because we've researched it, and the next agency's come and pitched exactly the same idea.
Yeah.
That just shows you the groupthink that's kind of
very homogenised. It's extremely homogenised. Yeah.
There's a big part missing out of this, which is all of these issues also exist in all of our clients, and they are not, I would argue, addressing them almost as immediately as we are trying to address them, and that inevitably they have the final say on what we make. And everything else. Sorry.
Is it Jess? There's another lady just behind you with a beautiful dress on, t-shirt on, flowery dress. Oh, that one there. Okay, no, whatever. And then we'll come straight to you. Sorry, I didn't see the lady in the red over there.
Sorry. Yeah. I just wanted to say that it's more of an observation. I was up at the hubs, workshop hubs, up at the top of the hill.
Okay.
And they're all full of young kids. The one empty hub was the one for advertising. The kids had gone to film, they'd gone to comedy. And even the ones who'd gone to film, when I bumped into them, I talked to everybody. They were coming out and they said, we're really disappointed. We thought this was about creative filmmaking. It's all about advertising. And they'd walked out.
Right.
And I think it's happening right here, what you're talking about. And if you look around the demographic in this room, the young kids are all outside.
Yeah.
Thank you. God, I feel a bit depressed now you said that. I feel like hiding my face a bit. I started in the industry 30 years ago as well, and I encountered the whole working class issues that you highlighted before, Stephen, and having remained in the industry in various guises, it hasn't changed much, and that is fairly depressing. And I agree with you actually as well, Jim, it's probably got a bit worse. There was a few people that sounded like me then, there's even less now. But really, I wanted to pick up on some of the initiatives that you said you started following Stephen's research, which I think are fantastic. The whole removing the CV and allowing them to express themselves, all of that stuff is absolutely great, and I've written myself a list. My question is, how many of them stayed? Did they like what they found because they were, brought in this new, more inclusive way, or did they still turn up and go, yeah, not for me, thanks?
It's a really interesting question. I think it's quite a difficult one to answer at the minute, because I think most of the work that we have done has been about awareness and outreach just of the industry. So it's been largely with sixth form colleges, and so there hasn't been, let me go back. When Michael and I founded it, we didn't know what we were going to create. All we knew was we had to raise awareness of our industry and the jobs that were in it. And we always said, actually, great if they come to work for VCP, but we just want to give them sight of a whole other kind of opportunity. And I think the best example of what we've done is that the 8 uni students from Staffs Uni that we had last year, who were largely from graphic design, and we're trying to broaden out the pathways as well so that we get a wider variety. We've got a better variety this year, but all 8 of those went on to get jobs in the creative industries up north in various different guises and forms, and all of them said, blow our own trumpet, said that they probably couldn't have done it without the help, the confidence that we had given them, because we did a lot of the internship is about soft skills as well. It's about presentation, it's about speaking in front of other people, it's about how to present yourself and prepare yourself. So some of them stayed in advertising in smaller B2B type agencies up in Stoke. Some of them went on to work for Bet365. I think a couple of them went to Manchester to work for other agencies there. But
Did you ever support them in going to find other roles in the creative industry? Maybe advertising wasn't for them, to go into public relations or into broadcast or into events or marketing?
We did, in the sense that we offered them mentorship and advice and the benefit of our connections if they wanted it. But of course, part of the problem is we don't have a huge number of connections north of London is part of the problem.
Right, yeah.
Can I just add a point to that? Because I think it's
very quickly, though.
Question. I know in research what has been seen is that if you're not from a Russell Group university, often when you end up in advertising, you overwork to try and compensate. So, and that creates burnout. So you're trying to make it. You're trying to constantly make it up because you feel inadequate.
What? That's horrendous. My goodness. Well, thank you very much. We've run out of time. You've all been an amazing audience. Thank you for bearing with me and stuttering, but also to Jim, who's been amazing. Thank you so much. To Stephen, you've been incredible, really insightful. And last but not least, Peniel, you've gave some really valuable feedback. So thank you so, so much. Thank you, everyone. And I'm just going to leave you with this one last thought. Rishi Sunak, please don't tell me off for saying this, is offering 50 billion boost to our creative industry economy. And you know what he calls us? The pillars of the economy. I'll leave you with that.